Welcome to another edition of Virtual Symposium 2020. I'm Jim Kaler, and I'm going to be your host for this session. And I hope everyone is doing well during COVID-19. Before we get started with our special guest tonight, I wanted to extend a very special thanks to AECOM Sports and the MSA on-campus class of 2020. They were not going to let COVID-19 stop them from putting on a symposium. So we're making history tonight with this entire series, and we're going virtual for the first time ever. So I hope you enjoy the content, and I know you're going to enjoy tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Amie Sheridan, who I had the pleasure of recruiting to our first ever professional MSA class. So she's one of our pioneers there. And Amie, so good to have you with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
And then with us tonight are two students representing the dual degree program, Bryn Cooley, who'll be graduating in May, and Josh Keels, who will be graduating from the PMSA program this coming May. So let me bring everyone together here real quick. There we go. All right, so thanks, gang, for turning out tonight. I'm going to walk Amie through a number of questions, and then both Josh and Bryn, if you've got any questions you want to put up on the board, you know how to do that. I'll pop the screen back up. So Amie will make this very casual and interactive and make the most out of the session.
Sounds great.
Okay, Amie, real quick, I think it would be great to have you build on your background. I got to know you when I was recruiting you for the online program, but you had a pretty good career going and was doing a lot of e-commerce work with the NHL and some experience with Saatchi and Saatchi. But why don't you real quickly just run our students and alumni through your background and how you got to where you are today with Technically Sports.
Great. Absolutely. So hi to all of my alum friends and all of the students that are, I guess, virtually on campus right now. And thanks again for inviting me. Sure. So I'll go through, the brief history, a story of my career so far. I started off at the NHL as a young, recent graduate. And there actually, where do I begin here? So at the NHL, I was hired as as an e-commerce manager. Actually, I ran their online auction program when it was really just up and running. And you can think of that as eBay for NHL, where things that are sweaty cost more. Right. And so I learned a lot about memorabilia. I learned a lot about digital commerce, which was still relatively new at the time. Back then, people were absolutely not purchasing things on their phones. Back then, actually, most people had a Razor cell phone, if you recall the Razor phones by Motorola. So it was prior to the smartphone boom. And so I like to say that I got in on digital business and e-commerce right as it was sort of becoming a thing at the sports leagues, right as they were learning how to market digital catalogs to sports fans. And so from there, I had an opportunity to move over to the agency side where I worked at Saatchi and Saatchi on the Philadelphia Tri-State Toyota Dealers Association account. So Jim, from your days in sales, you probably recognize that sort of tier 2 dealership sponsor type, where so I was working with Toyota, and we used to say we were wallpapering the city of Philadelphia with their logo inside venues and outside venues. So on parking lots, we would take Toyota vehicles. That was back in the day of the Prius launch. We were taking Toyota vehicles and we were bringing them to sporting events, driving them on the concourse. We were bringing them to music festivals and doing all kinds of activation on behalf of that brand.
And Amie, probably a time where the industry was starting to get more sophisticated with measuring return on investment and just exactly how they could measure the value of their partnerships.
You're absolutely right. So that was a time where we were being tasked to figure out ROI. So you're 100% right. I remember them saying, well, how do we track the value of all of these on-site activations that you're doing? How much business are we getting from the car being inside the Wells Fargo Center? So what we were actually doing is we were collecting paper leads, and then we were taking the paper leads, little surveys that people would fill out, and we were actually handing them to the dealers. And so the dealers were then tracking how much foot traffic, how many phone calls they were getting, and how many cars they were selling based on our efforts. And yes, I remember Toyota corporate sort of coming down on the agency and saying, we need to see ROI, we need to see ROI. It was a big thing, especially with digital. And I think back then digital was still a throw-in. It was an added value for a sponsor. So it was TV, it was radio. And so we were coming in with Toyota and trying to do more digital activation. So it was a time that there was a lot of innovation going on there, but it was also a time where people were sort of being educated on the fly. Some of the industry understood digital and some didn't. So it was a really interesting time to be in sponsorship.
Right, and then on to NBC Sports.
Mm-hmm. So NBC Sports, this was a typical sports industry move where people that I had worked with at the NHL called me and said, we are trying to start a digital business down at Comcast Sportsnet. Would you like to be part of it? So it was an in-business sort of, move. And I was able to work with some of the great people that I had worked with in New York City. What we were doing there is we were trying to compete with ESPN on the local level. So ESPN covers sports from the national level down, and Comcast Sportsnet and the regional networks across the country were saying, well, we're going to take local talent and we're going to cover sports from the local markets up. And we believe that we can compete with ESPN that way. So I was able to be part of the team that really launched the regional sports nets onto digital. We were taking what was a website that included the network's programming schedule. We turned that into a complete editorial experience for fans. And so that was, again, another time that was really pivotal for journalism, where we were actually getting a lot of the newspaper reporters in the local markets and turning them into digital reporters.
Then you kind of got the bug to come back and get that master's degree with us.
Yeah, so that's when I talked to Jim. And I put the little, the button there to say, hey, this is when Ohio impacted me. I was still working with NBC Sports. And I knew all along that I wanted to sort of branch out and be more of an educator. And I had always had the writing bug. I remember asking my bosses in my NBC job, can I write articles for Sportsnet? And they're like, well, we have a whole team to do that, right? And so finally, when I went and I got my master's, my goal, and I may have told you this, Jim, when we talked, was to be able to teach and write about the business. And I remember you saying, well, you can do that from a beach chair. You need the degree. So I went and I did that, and it was wonderful. And I think one of the professors, whose name escapes me, put me in touch with someone at Drexel University. And that's when I taught my first class about the business in their sports, I don't know if it's administration major. So I created a course there, and I was able to take that course and use it teaching for St. Joe's University. Also for OU, I taught for OU for a couple of semesters in the master's program online. And so that degree really gave me the keys that I needed to pivot from being inside the business on the media, I guess the media side, and then to moving out to being independent and being able to sort of direct the ship on my own, writing for Sports Business Journal as a contributor and also teaching at St. Joe's. And so I became full-time at St. Joe's. I was contributing to SBJ week over week, doing mobile app reviews. I interviewed people all across the industry. It was really great. I absolutely loved it. And then, I kept thinking to myself, okay, so what am I going to do with all this experience, and how am I going to make this valuable to people in the industry? Which is when, I eventually founded Technically Sports, my consulting firm. And I serve now sports industry leaders, startups, businesses that really would like to, what I say, up their content game and have an impact on the business, be seen and heard by their peers and prospects.
And if there was ever a time in the history of sport to up the game of content, it's right now with COVID-19 and everything that's going on.
Absolutely. And it's such a strange thing, because it is such a volatile time, right? There's so much change going on in the business, and some of it is very, very sad, with people losing their jobs. But, I've been saying over and over, what better time than to really, take the next step as a leader in this business and start talking about, what's happening right now.
All right. So let's move the show along here and talk a little bit. I've just come up with different themes looking at your website and everything, and this whole concept of niche branding. If you wouldn't mind sharing really what you've learned as you've built this company out, and your advice for current students, alumni, and anyone else that is, I would say in particular, going to be dealing with biz development, but also personal brand and finding your niche. I mean, all of our students right now are trying to get a good handle on that.
Absolutely. So this is one of the most exciting things about sort of where I've come to in the life of my business. I say that because I think every business has a life. It's a living, breathing thing. Things evolve. And what is super, super important when you're thinking about your personal brand is stop thinking about you, right? Stop thinking about yourself. Think about who you are trying to reach and who you are trying to serve. And I think it's easy to flip that upside down and get it wrong. So one of the first things I learned in having my business was to not talk about myself, to create a business that speaks to the target client, right? And so you'll notice that in most of the copy that I share, both on my website and in any of the content that I put out, I'm really speaking to my target client. And what happens there is you get clearer and clearer on how to communicate. It becomes easier and easier to build your business to attract your ideal clients when you are speaking to them with all of your messaging, right? So with any client that I would take on, any person, any brand, my first question is, so who is your target audience? Let's get super clear on that, because that's what you build your business around, content that serves them, right? And so when we're talking about building a personal brand, you do need to take inventory of what is your superpower? What are your skills that other people need or want?
Right.
And then how do you communicate it in a way that they feel like it's just for them, right? It's exactly for them. And I think that's sort of the magic of personal branding.
Cool. Hey, Josh has got a question, so let's bring him in.
So this is kind of going a little bit back to more of your past and like how you came up, Amie. Going a little bit away from the niche branding, but you seem to have gotten in at a really good time when it came to digital, as people were kind of trying to figure it out. And I know as someone like myself with an entrepreneurial mindset, is always trying to find like, okay, what can be like the next big thing that I can get into now? So there's a lot that kind of come to mind. I mean, like media rights, obviously over the next few years, especially with where you came from at NBC. And then obviously things like sports gaming, esports. Are there any trends in particular that you're keeping like a particularly close eye on over the next year? And obviously there's a whole new set of things with the world we're living in now, but just kind of thinking more of like of the sports industry as a whole? Is there anything you're really keeping an eye on?
Great
Well,
question, Josh.
yeah, that's a great question, and really well taken. When you look back at my career, I think my mind was always right there in the question that you're asking is, what is going to happen next, right? And so you kind of get your sensor out, and you start looking at, where are the waves? What's happening here? How can I make sure that I stay on that wave, that I don't get left behind, right? And so the same applies now, and to anybody that is really trying to stay relevant or build a business, or make sure their personal brand speaks the right message about them. Right now, what am I paying attention to? Well, of course, I'm paying attention to content trends, right? Because that's the business that I'm in. And so I'm always trying to keep my finger on the pulse of how are people consuming content? How are brands and companies out there outside of the sports business presenting their content? What formats, right? And sort of what's moving the needle for a brand or a business. If you look at sports journalism and how that landscape has changed, look at Barstool Sports, look at the business model, right? They're putting out hundreds of pieces of content a day. Why are they a leader? You have to ask yourself that question. I think one of the answers is that they know who their target audience is. And the second is that they put out tons of content. So you look at sort of what moves the needle and what brings a brand from being, a player to a powerhouse. And you look at, thought leaders, right? Like, Gary V. Everybody seems to be following Gary V. But he's right on the wave, right? And so I keep my finger on the pulse of that type of thing. And then also, as far as what's happening in the industry digitally, we're seeing a lot with esports. Obviously, esports doesn't stop with COVID-19.
Right.
And sports betting. Yeah.
Amie, I changed up the slide there just for a second, because one of the things you do with your clients is you really coach them up how to land interviews in sports media. And I know you're going to be helping us with our new sports gambling certificate. So give our students and our alums some insights here, if you would.
Okay, so how to land sports media interviews right now. So this is a blog post. It's actually the cover photo for a blog post that I think I put out last week. And inside the blog post, I really go into why right now is a great time to emerge as a thought leader, and how I suggest that you do that. So all people are talking about right now in the industry is coronavirus. Right? What's the impact? What's going to happen? When is sports going to come back? How is it going to be different? And so my challenge to industry leaders in sports is, what do you have to add to that conversation? Every person has something unique to add to that conversation. How do you how do you land a spot on a podcast or a radio show? You need to present yourself as a niche expert. Okay, so I think the example that I give in the blog post is, imagine you are the head of commerce for the NFL. Well, it would be very easy for me to spin up a story, right, and present you as an expert in what is happening with the trends in the sales of hats and jerseys right now, right? And what do we...
Amie, on that end, I think it just came out today, between Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay and them just releasing their new uniforms in the last, 24, 48 hours, their sales they're on fire like never before.
And that's so super interesting. And I think for someone that is inside that business, who has data, right, that they're able to share, to say, well, you might think that sales are down, but actually the numbers suggest otherwise, and here's why. Right? So what podcast host wouldn't want to hear that story? And so I think that's my point is, if we're all sitting at home wondering how we can make an impact, I think getting out there and sharing your area of expertise is one surefire way to do that. And it's also a way to stay relevant and maybe even build an audience in the off season because people are paying attention.
Right. And then you gave us an example here. So I'm kind of curious to see the story behind this slide. Go ahead.
So this is Molly Arbogast. Molly Arbogast is one of my clients who I absolutely love and respect so much for what she's done in the business. She is a sponsorship expert. She comes from the sales side of things, working with the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the WNBA, Learfield IMG. What we did here is we created a really, really sharp profile, just presenting Molly as an expert in sponsorship, which she is. But within her profile, we created 5 topics that would be of interest to a host of a show, a podcast, a television host. And we created questions to go with those topics. So when a host would receive Molly's profile, they would immediately know what to ask Molly. And they would immediately understand where she came from and why she is qualified to be on that show. And so part of landing guest slots right now in the media is presenting yourself as an expert, but making that turnkey for a host to say, yes, I want to talk to this person. It's very clear to me what I would ask them. And I can tell you, Jim, that, you know, within minutes of me pitching Molly's profile to Sports Business Radio, which is a top tier podcast in our business, I received a yes. Yes, I want to talk to Molly, right? And so what happens here is Molly's profile is instantly lifted when she appears on top tier podcasts. And then what happens after that is that other hosts call Molly. So it becomes organic, and actually they do my job for me.
I knew Molly back when she was selling sponsorships for the Eagles, and
oh, great.
She hired one of our alums, Sean O'Hara. But so today she's got her own agency.
She has an agency. It's POV Sports Marketing, and she serves a bunch of really cool clients like ASM Global, like Stroman and Wawa here in this DMA. So she is really a superstar, and it's really fun for me to talk about all the stuff that we're doing. We're doing it now, you know, people are home, but we're doing this stuff now, which is why it's so exciting and relevant.
Well, you'll have to give her our best, and we'll make sure that you can send her a copy of this recording.
I will.
Let's take this a little deeper, if you will. And I saw on your website the 3-step guide to creating content that sells. And,
yes.
and I think your headline on the slide is think. So
yeah.
What's your message here?
So I try to break my site up into just action verbs, right? And why did I say think? I said that because if you are a brand or a thought leader who is trying to put content out there that resonates, that makes a difference, you have to think. Okay, you have to take a moment to think, who is my target customer? What types of content can I put out that will serve them? Because guess what? They don't care what I've accomplished, right? They care how I can help them. And so in the 3-step guide, what I take the readers through is a worksheet that is really sort of a DIY version of what I would do with them if they were going to take the first step into working with me. So it's, who is your target customer? What is your area of expertise? Let's look at the Venn diagram. Let's figure out what content is right in the center that you can put out that would attract them and also build your credibility.
Great. And then I was talking to a mutual friend the other day in Caroline Amie.
Yes.
And as I was looking at this slide, read. One of the things she told our students, she hosted them for a live webinar, and she was saying she was recently talking to a CEO of an NFL team who during COVID is doing things that he likes, but he normally wouldn't have quite as much time, and that he's blitzed through 3 books and also lost 10 pounds. So I have no idea who that is, but as I was looking through your slides and read, I'm like, boy, there probably isn't a better time ever to just take take some time out to catch up. What's your message here with Reed?
So Reed is really the headline for my blog. So Technically Sports is the name of my consulting firm, but it is also the title of my blog. And so what I'm encouraging thought leaders to do is to read not only my blog, but of course to read anything and everything that's relevant. So for example, right now, I'm reading books around business development, about scaling your business, right? So when you're an entrepreneur, when you're somebody like me, or when you're somebody like a lot of my clients, right? How do you scale your business and do it successfully, and not make some of the mistakes that people make along the way? And so I think right now, again, is a great time to really brush up on skills that maybe you have been on the back burner, or something that, you know, really will drive a change in your business. And then I can tell you too that because there are no live sports right now, because people are not busy, they are reading more. And I can say that over the past couple of weeks, I have had phone conversations with people that I probably never would have been able to get a hold of if we were not in COVID, right? So, you know, I think right now is a great time to, you know, brush up, to reach out, and have conversations that you wouldn't normally be able to have, because normally people are just so busy.
Great segue to your next slide on talk. And one of the things that we've been stressing to our on-campus students is just to your point, never been a greater time to reach out to somebody for not a job interview, but an informational interview, and pick somebody's brain. The one thing I love about our industry is that when times get tough, the sports business industry is always very willing to give back. So what's the message with talk?
So talk is all about putting yourself out there, okay? And you can think about that with regard to a thought leader who maybe is on LinkedIn but has never published an article, or a thought leader who maybe got furloughed and is going to go out there and post something on LinkedIn in an authentic way to let the industry know what's going on with them. And then from the perspective of a student, you know, I have always been such a proponent of the informational interview. I've in any of my classes, it's actually an assignment. But, you know, right now is a great time to send that email, to connect with someone that maybe is in your sort of wish list of employers. And to Jim's point, you're not asking them for a job, you're just putting yourself on their radar, and you're learning a little bit more about them. And so as part of talk, a message would be, people love to talk about their experience and themselves. So if you're a student or a recent grad who's looking to network, a really great way to do that is just to, you know, schedule a call with a leader and pick their brain on their personal experience and just let them talk, right? And then suddenly you have this sort of authentic relationship with that person that it is then on you to nurture that relationship until the time is right for perhaps a career opportunity.
All right, Bryn's got a quick question for us, so I want to bring her into the studio here, world headquarters in Athens, Ohio. Bryn, go ahead.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for talking to
Hi.
us tonight. So I just had a quick question about kind of social media and digital content strategies. Going back to what you were talking about, knowing your audience. What social media strategies do you think work best, you know, during this coronavirus time? You know, what type of contents should teams and organizations be focusing on? How do they find that balance of being, you know, sensitive to what's going on, where they're not totally ignoring everything, but, you know, also not posting enough and still keeping their fans engaged and keeping that follower count up?
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, very good question. Thank you. So it's a mixture of a few things, right? So you mentioned the word sensitive, and that's super important, right? So I think most brands and businesses and teams in the space are going out and they're sending a message to their fans that's sort of addressing COVID, right? But then aside from that, I think the theme is we want to create content that serves our fans. And so you ask yourself again, who is your target audience and what do they want? So what do the fans want? Okay. We know we can't show them live sports, but let's show them stuff that they will love. And so that might be classics. It might be highlights. They might engage some of the athletes to create content that they wouldn't normally be able to create if they were in the regular season. And so it's kind of huddling up. And I kind of have a blog post that is about to be released called Put Your Business in a Blender, right? So it's huddling up and it's taking all of your assets and it's creating something new. And I think the teams that really can come forward and create something new, maybe a new format or a new type of content that features some of their really powerful assets, I think they'll come out of this as leaders. And I think that's sort of my take on what should be happening and what could be happening right now.
So Bryn's question is a great segue really to the last slide of your presentation today on build. And I know that you've worked with your clients on building something called a content playbook. Can you give some additional insights there?
Yes. So the content playbook is really a way that I dig into a business and I pull out different ways that they can present themselves through content. So content in any format. And I give this to them in a 2 to 3 page PDF where I dig into who their target audiences are and what types of content they can put out that would serve those particular audiences. Then I take it a step further and kind of give them recommendations on the format. So video, audio, perhaps they want to create their own podcast, which is super popular right now. And what is the series of content that would power that podcast, for example? So I'll give them sample titles. I'll give them sort of a summary of each series that I propose. And in most cases, I'm proposing up to 12 content series, and then recommending how they would execute them. And in most cases, if a brand does decide to come on and work with me from that point, we would go ahead and we would cherry pick the content series that they felt most passionate about, and we would put them into action. Okay, so the playbook is really step one of a formal engagement, whereby the brand can say, yes, let's go with this playbook. I'd like to work with you, Amie, to execute it. Or, you know what, this playbook is great. We're going to take it in-house and we're going to execute it ourselves. And either way is totally fine, right? Because I'm in the business to, serve people and fulfill sort of the needs that they have. And so some brands are in and some brands are, we're going to take it in-house, and that's totally fine. It just is a roadmap for them.
Right. Okay, so what I want to do now is really open it up for some more questions. I'm going to bring Josh and Bryn back into the fold and see if we can't throw a couple questions your way before we wrap up for the evening.
I can throw a question or two.
Go ahead, Josh.
So we talked a lot about digital over the past hour or so, and especially, I've had friends in the industry that they'll sell commercial spots for March Madness and college basketball, college football, and they're having to go back and give refunds to brands, and it's a big mess. But it seems to me, at least when I look at it kind of from the outside a bit, that now would be a time more than ever for brands to be, first of all, obviously pushing out more content, but also spending with digital. And I'm curious to know how some of your clients have navigated that with their brand clients, if you're working directly with any brands that are maybe shifting resources and how that looks.
I think right now is sort of this, I think we're still in the fog a little bit here with how much longer are, we going to be in this fog. And I'm not seeing any clear-cut patterns as of yet. I think we're still in the phase where Brands, leagues, teams, entertainment companies are making tough decisions about their employees. And so I don't think that the high level priority is on content right now. They certainly should be focused on content, but I think because there's so much going on within their organizations, the focus is really on their employees. And I think that's a really big important thing too, is making sure that the employees that are either staying or that are furloughed or, are feeling the love. And I think soon we'll start to see the patterns changing with regard to the content that's coming off of these channels, but I'm not really seeing any clear-cut trend as of yet.
Hey, Amie, I was on a call a couple hours ago with the steering committee of National Sports Forum, and John Durbin's the vice president of marketing with the Buffalo Sabres. And one of the things he said is that what he believes teams are doing right now is like, what's something unique we can bring to the table in COVID-19? And he used a great example. They're very involved with Bauer, hockey manufacturer. What Bauer's doing right now is taking their factories and making plastic shields, much like you would see on a hockey helmet, and making them available for a lot of the healthcare workers in Buffalo. So that was just, to me, that's a good example. Like, look, we're not going to push hockey right now, but what can we do to help? And I know, wouldn't mind you talking about this for a minute, but your husband runs the arena in Philadelphia at Temple University, and they've been pulled right into action, correct?
We are in it right now, Jim. So they have been called into action. It's been a week, maybe two, of them transforming the basketball arena into a hospital. It's been absolutely incredible. I know that they're not the only facility in the country that's doing that, but they're one of the first, being that we're here on the East Coast and we are in a highly populated area. I think starting next week, they're going to be taking on patients. And so, from the facility manager standpoint, which I kind of, I have a little bit of a perspective since I live with a facility manager and I'm married to one. Yes. But just all these different requests coming in. We need to clean this. We need to clean that. The medical staff is using the suites as their offices. If you can imagine sort of what it kind of looks like in there right now, it's just completely different than what we're used to. And I think there's so many questions. There's so much uncertainty, right? With regard to how far this will go, how long this will stretch, using these sports facilities to take care of these patients. But on one hand, it's let's do everything that we can, and on the other hand, at the same time, a facility is furloughing most of its staff.
Right.
So it's really it's a crazy time, and we're living through it now. And I'm sure that next year we'll be looking back on this like, wow, but it's definitely going to change the landscape in some way forever.
Well, next year we'd love to get you back for Symposium. Brent, I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind. We were speaking earlier this afternoon about the job search and some of the things that you might be doing, but here's your chance to ask an expert in Amie for not only advice for you, but for some of your classmates. So fire away.
Yeah, Amie, I actually was going to ask you a couple questions about, related to current students, but as I'm a current student, as well as, a good number of other people who are going to be watching this video, what is the best advice that you have, in terms of searching for a job? You've definitely inspired me to go and email after this call a couple of people that I've been meaning to email and, pick their brains about their position. But what best advice do you have for us as current students moving forward, kind of with the future unknown, and what do you think is the best route for us?
Yeah, so of course, if you have the opportunity to get out and reach out, do so. Do those informational calls. They really do pay off, particularly when you manage the follow-up properly. And so that looks like, to me, It's always the handwritten thank you.
Yeah.
Very big stressor. The handwritten thank you is like the way to break through the clutter. And then the check-ins. So Jim, one of the students there, Preston McClellan, who is now with the PGA Tour,
Right.
you know, he did this the right way. And so I think he's like my perfect example of what a student should do as they approach graduation, or as they have recently graduated, is to reach out to a bunch of people, have some phone conversations, send the handwritten thank you note, check in every so often. He's, like I said, he's now at the PGA Tour, so he's sort of the poster child for the right way to network.
He is doing some great work.
He's amazing.
And just to put a plug in for him, he's done some mentorship with Bryn, because Bryn comes from a golf family. Her
right. Okay.
Yeah, her father was a golf coach at Ohio University.
Oh, so keep in touch with Preston.
I actually just got back from the Players Championship a few weeks ago, shadowing Preston. So had a great time.
Yeah. And aside from that, I think one of my biggest pieces of advice for you or students, anybody on campus, is to really take your soul searching seriously, to really take inventory of your skill set. So different people are good at different things. When I teach courses, I always see my salespeople, like I see them fast. And I want to always say, in a class of 30, there might be 4 salespeople in there. Not everybody should be going for ticket sales. That's just not something everybody should be doing. So take an inventory of the landscape of the sports industry and how big it is, really, when you go outside of the circle of the teams and the leagues. Look at the agencies, all of the touch points for the industry. It might not be that your first position is with a team. It might not be that you'll end up being the GM of a sports team. But if you can really say, well, what am I really good at and what can I really contribute? I say start there and think about how you can work your way into the place that you'd like to be, continuing to kind of keep your eyes on the trends. And so, are there going to be a ton of jobs available in facility management at any given time? Well, there's only so many of those. What's happening in esports? What's happening in sports betting and mobile? And, looking at all of those things and trying to identify the businesses that are in those spaces. There are so many, right? So really take a look at the industry from like 30,000 feet up. And try not to focus so hard on the traditional sports business.
Cool. All right, we've got time for one more question, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna swipe it. But Amie, as we get this sports gambling certificate going, love to get your initial thoughts. So we did the release yesterday.
Okay.
And we're getting some good lift, but I'm like, okay, we gotta keep it going. So is my next move an article on LinkedIn, or what advice would you give me on the fly?
Well, that is, so in launching the sports gambling certificate and how to sort of generate enrollment.
Well, yeah. So right now we have a landing page, and we'll be sending an email to all of our alums. So anybody who's watching this will probably have gotten an email by the time there. But strategically, for the rest of the industry where we don't have a personal relationship, but they certainly respect Ohio University, getting on some podcasts would be great. But should I be writing some content tomorrow on LinkedIn to try to advance the story?
I say absolutely. And really, again, thinking about, and you know this better than anybody, who that target sort of reader is, and how you can reach that target reader. So is that reader on LinkedIn? Is that reader on Instagram? Right. So where is that student? And I think, creating content, writing articles for LinkedIn, posts are really effective. Sort of, I'm seeing a trend in the space for more long form posts on platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram.
Okay.
So people don't like to kind of take any action. People are lazy, right? They like to stay where they are and they like to scroll. So
Mhm.
I'm seeing this sort of trend there where posting within a post is really popular, a little bit longer form. Um, but I also think that there are groups, there are hashtags. Hashtags are super effective
Right,
way to sort
right.
of get your content within the realm of a certain audience that happens to be following a certain hashtag. Um, and absolutely podcasts too. So that again, it's who are you trying to reach and what are they listening to? Is
Right.
it the sports business stuff or is
Well,
it general sports
yeah,
stuff?
initially we think it's college athletic administrators, but since that release went out, I've heard from one person that sells sponsorships for a professional baseball team who's interested in the course because he's sports gambling is going to become legal, and then another alum that works for an agency and a
Okay.
brand and knows that she wants to learn the landscape. So
Yep.
as people start to self-identify who's interested, we have a landing page and we'll learn
Yep.
more. I think the target audience will be college athletic administrators. But
Well,
let
that's
me,
really, yeah.
yeah.
And I think too,
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I think too, thinking strategically about what publications are out there that are serving that audience now.
Yeah.
You think about like the D1 ticker.
We got a
Yeah.
little pop in the D1 ticker yesterday, so
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that.
So you're already on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hey, so let me just pivot off that question, and I threw LinkedIn there for a specific reason. But one of our students, they're all in their capstone, both our online students and our on-campus students. And one of the assignments for the on-campus students is to write a paper on thought leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So Sven was the first person to do as such. And I think people that are normally super busy got a little bit more time to read LinkedIn these
Yes.
days, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the most authentic engagement on that platform that I've ever seen. I mean, when the NBA shut down, the engagement that happened on LinkedIn within, conversations within conversations, it just felt so real. It sort of took me back to the days of like the AOL and, little mini chat rooms that are sort of
Right.
occurring on LinkedIn around these topics that feel so real because so many people are touched by this crisis. So I think, yes, now is a great time to get out there and really start to build, a little bit of a following on LinkedIn in little ways, every day, every week.
Right.
I think one of the main things is consistency. It's not that it has to be every day, but if you're showing up once a week, I think that is an effective way to begin.
Gotcha. All right. Well, unfortunately, time is about running out. But before we leave, I wanted to give everyone a chance after they view this to know how to track you down and not to set you up, but I think you're going to get some people reaching out that want a little bit of your time after.
That would be great.
So,
I'm happy to, I am so thrilled to, have been here tonight and to be able to answer some of the questions. And I'd be happy to, be a resource to anybody who's watching and, as they kind of move along in their career journey.
Okay. And Josh and Bryn, we appreciate you jumping on board and representing both of your classes. All right, so that's going to wrap up this session of Virtual Symposium 2020. I hope you benefited from it as much as I did. Amie is just a great example of someone that has continued to grow her career since graduating from our program and certainly believes in giving back. So thanks for tuning in.